It's important to note that trust is the currency of advertising, and so if we have any blips or issues with trust, it's going to impact all of us. And I think we need to think about how do we kind of raise the bar in that area. The industry has definitely suffered from a lot of external scrutiny, a lot of it brought on by our own practices. I think in many respects we haven't done a good job of anticipating some pretty obvious things that have emerged around disclosure, brand safety, ad intrusion, and yeah, we need to rally around it, and that's been a big discussion here at Con. Personally, I've been very passionate about the topic, especially as a consumer, because I do tend to bring a certain healthy level of distrust on advertisers that slap me in the face or play a little fast and loose in terms of how they collect the data. And we have to assume there's a lot of people that feel the same way, and we just need to get in front of it. Or we may not have the choice, because obviously a lot of us are now responding to GDPR regulation and the like, but it even applies to areas like word of mouth marketing, fake followers. There's a lot of territory we need to figure out on this front. So the obvious question is, does this impact spending, the big backlash? And I think the answer is it certainly challenges it. It creates friction. It means there's more noise that we need to invest to break through. It means our spending may not have as high a return when there's so much cynicism and negativity out there. And again, remember, we're in an environment where the negativity inevitably spills into search results, Wikipedia, and these other areas where it has a latency effect. So it just means we have to work much, much harder. And it's very difficult not to find digital stains on our industry on Google or Baidu search results related to a lot of these trust issues. I think we need to be sensitive about too much concentration of power with any set of players in the industry. We clearly want to ensure that a lot of the great innovation flourishes and that it's not kind of stamped out. I think Google and Facebook play a very, very important role in the ad industry. I think they've raised the bar in many areas, but clearly, from our perspective, we obviously strive to work with a lot of players, and we just need to be on guard with anyone consolidating too much power. It's a really exciting time to be in brand building, in part because of all the emerging technologies and capabilities that are emerging. And in my role at Nestlé, my new title is Global Head of Digital Innovation and Service Models. And it's an important way of thinking about what's happening today. You've got this opportunity to put service layers on top of brand. In fact, I sometimes wonder whether brands alone, physical brands, will be sufficiently competitive, especially at a time when e-commerce may bring a lot of private label realities. So the question is, what will give you that extra advantage? It could be AR, VR. It could be voice technology. It could be ways that you build communities around your brands. It could be alternative direct-to-consumer business models. These are the questions that I'm thinking about constantly, and all these new enabling technologies open up a lot of new territory for us. The key to win is that we have to do a lot of test and learn. We can't just make one bet. We need to be super hyper attentive to early signals and what's coming around the corner. We need to learn from others. Sometimes it's not always about first mover advantage, or it may be about being a fast follower, but I think it's a very, very promising state. I think brand builders have a very unique opportunity to create entirely new experiences for consumers, and that's certainly going to be my passion going into a lot of work with Nestlé. Well, I think the digital advertising space has a lot of new opportunities emerging. I mean, clearly we're going to see better, smarter, more programmatic targeting of advertising. I think that's just a natural law of progression in our space. But the area I'm probably most excited is what I'm now branding as kind of multi-sensory experiences. I actually prefer using terms like that versus voice or AR because it really gets to the heart of, we're appealing to the five senses of consumers. We're bringing a whole different form of connecting emotionally and experiential with consumers, and I think ad models are going to evolve and adapt. I also believe that ad models are going to become a lot more invitational, which is it's less going to be about spear phishing to the consumer than kind of opening up our door, our welcome mat, our friendly face, inviting them in and allowing them to ask us questions, maybe throw some complaints our way, but turn those into opportunities. And I do think a lot of the e-commerce players are very, very good at that. I think in e-commerce, you've got businesses like Zappos or Chewy where they're practically incenting the consumer to complain, and they know that those are privileged moments where they have the opportunity to earn loyalty and ultimately advocacy. There's a lot of things we're doing at Nestlé that I think kind of inspire me and which I'm using as a basis to encourage other brand builders within Nestlé to emulate. I've always liked what Nespresso is doing. They've always been experiential. They sell a huge percentage of their product online. They have wonderful boutiques which have become quite digitized, and just a walk down the street to the one here, you'll see a lot of that in action, the automated computerized checkout, the virtual replenishment, but it's still an offline experience. We're also doing a lot of work with Nespresso on AR, VR. We're really ahead of the curve with some of the work that Google is doing. But other brands like Nescafe, Milo, based in some of our Asian markets, is doing some incredible things in taking their equity with sports and instruction for youth and bringing that to life with digital. There's just so many examples. We're really into nutrition, health, science, and they're bringing a whole level of online advisory services to the equation. We're really big in cooking, and obviously digitally enabled cooking solutions are a really, really big deal. We're doing a lot of testing with Alexa, meets the recipe, meets visual browsing. So a lot of things are going on, but we still have quite a journey in front of us. Innovation is really challenging, especially in large organizations where you just have a lot of calcified rules and processes and layers. And I think the leader, not just the digital innovation leader, but any brand builder today, kind of has to bring almost a certain entrepreneur or startup naivete to the process in, almost like can do, and from a, how do we cut through the bureaucracy, how do we de-silo, how do we inspire our leadership to think differently? I'm a big believer in the power of reverse mentoring. We've reverse mentored hundreds of senior executives at Nestlé with some of our millennial employees, and it's created a real magic. I think, leaders that can balance formal versus informal power, that's a really important, tension. One of the things that I teach our young leaders is that the most important thing in digital is to understand tensions. Okay, it's not just about understanding the technologies and the buzzwords, but tensions like integration versus stimulation, formal versus informal power, ROI versus intuition, being a gatekeeper versus being an enabler, collaboration versus chaos. And it's never one or the other, but you have to straddle these tensions. And I find that the leaders that understand those tensions move the fastest in the large organizations. Yeah, one area I'm focusing a lot on, and it may surprise a lot of people, I'm really obsessed with internal innovation. How do organizations use internal collaboration systems, whether it's Slack, Salesforce Chatter, more recently Workplace, to kind of renegotiate the internal conversation. I think companies have a massive amount of latent value that they under-leverage because the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, or the top hasn't created the right sharing economy principles internally. And this is a big opportunity for Nestlé because we're a radically decentralized structure. And you want to figure out models where you don't put the top-down hammer and say, thou shalt do it. What you want to do is find the inspiration from a market, India, Philippines, Indonesia, and you want to create sharing mechanisms where you can inspire others to quickly follow. So I've been thinking a lot about that. I'm one of the most active users of Salesforce Chatter. I build internal communities. I produce content. I have to learn the hard way. Sometimes what motivates me more than anything else is the deafening sound of silence. If I produce content that people don't pay attention to, I immediately start thinking, what can I do better? And employees are incredibly tough audiences. They're big BS detectors. They can be cynical. They have the attention span of a flea. But if you can successfully engage them in the enterprise, you'll be hugely successful externally. And so I'm a big believer that internal mastery drives external mastery, but we need to lead different processes. This era of internal email spam to employees without any accountability for whether people read it or not is over. We've got to apply the same rules that are going to work in terms of nurturing relationships with consumers. One area I'm particularly passionate about is the whole purpose movement, and I do believe that more and more buyers are buying with purpose. We certainly see that with millennials. They're reading through the brand and they have very, very strong convictions about everything from sustainability to gender equality to supply chain sourcing, and it's really important and we need to be prepared for that. Nestlé is also has really been quite engaged on this area in terms of improving life, contributing to a healthier future, and it's kind of undergirded a lot of the work that we're doing. I think the interesting opportunity for the leader, the digital leader, the brand builder, is like, how do we translate that into through digital tools back to the consumer? Is it AR, VR? Is it voice that brings it to life? Is it better, smarter websites and apps? And I think this is an area where we still have a lot of thinking to do, and as I walked around the streets and the exhibits at Cannes, I was constantly thinking through, like, how do you make sure that you kind of get full credit, and how do you be on guard for those that are actually doing a better job with you? I do think there's a lot of competition from small entities, very, very purpose-driven, often fanatically purpose-driven, starting with the founder, and that message is breaking through in a much more effective way than the big companies. One of the most interesting things that I've seen here at Cannes is I do think a whole new conversation is emerging about China, Asia, some of the best mobile campaign. My favorite mobile campaign was from India, and I think that's really, really important. I think it's overdue. I thought it was great that they had a whole day dedicated to China. There's no question, you talked earlier about the duopoly. Let's not forget there's some really important players that can dance on the same stage as Facebook and Google, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and they are preparing not just for an e-commerce future but for a marketing future, and they are connecting the dots in very powerful ways, and we would all be very well served by looking over our shoulder and learning from them, not just on the data side but also on the creative side. And so I think for me that's one of the biggest stories coming out of Cannes. It's probably not as sexy for Ad Age and other publications, but it is a very important signal, and I've even written notes to my team, hey, let's pay attention to this. I strongly believe that the future of marketing is about service. In fact, I've even recently wrote a column in Medium insisting that the one category that's conspicuously missing at Cannes is service excellence. And here's why. I believe we're entering a period where we need to act and think like a hotel concierge. And the hotel concierge is highly anticipatory. He or she listens. They really know how to guide and shape the consumer. They're always selling, but they do it in a very subtle, non-intrusive way. And if you really think about, if you kind of peel the layers and the hype off of like chatbots, voice, talking robots, connected kitchens, it's all about answering questions. The number one activity with Alexa is answering questions. Are we prepared? The number one thing I do with brand builders when I get invited to consult, I say, can you name the top 5 questions that consumers ask you through consumer services? 99% of the time they fail. Why? We're not trained as brand builders to think that way. We're trained to target to consumers, but now they're coming at us, there's no friction. How do we win in that environment? It's a new discipline, And I'm even thinking that maybe that's my next book. But for con, it's an area we really need to dial up. It can't be a subsidiary of other categories like experiments. It's service, it's a discipline, and we need to rewire the incentives to ensure that everybody's moving in that direction.